listening to the Adventuring Party for the first week of January 2021. This week, seeing how cyberpunk dystopia is back in fashion, the party see what happens when you add a little Scottish madness to the mix. The Adventuring Party, discussing tabletop and radio gaming the Irish way.
Welcome to the party. I'm Savage Mick.
And I'm Eoin.
Right, we are here. We're doing a double header because no one else is quite as obsessed with the topic of discussion this evening as our own two selves. I think, Hida, you're the only other person I know who's quite as into this long forgotten but due a revival RPG as I was, and I kind of still am. It's rain-drenched, it's moody as all hell, it deals with misanthropic and sometimes inhuman players and characters in a world of darkness. But we're not talking about White Wolf's World of Darkness, are we?
Oh, hell no. We're talking about that most Glaswegian of RPGs. That one that really didn't like Margaret Thatcher very much. That RPG about paying an awful lot for your bullets. That RPG about being a special operative who's ludicrously well equipped, but also spends several hours a day sitting around in the unemployment office. That's right. It's SLA Industries.
Oh man, SLA Industries kind of defines the early part of my gaming as a member of a wider community. I played a lot of SLA, and I met a lot of people who, you know, I still count as friends today through games of SLA and SLA LARPs and things like that, while I was raging my way through my early 20s and the Dublin gaming convention scene. At one point, for my efforts, I managed to win on 3 separate occasions a copy of the core rulebook, which was funny because I had a copy of the core rulebook. I didn't need it again.
With how frangible the binding of the original core rulebook is, man. 3 copies is probably just a sound investment. You know, it's going to shed.
Well, I don't have one now.
Yeah.
That thing was like a claymore in terms of its willingness to fragment on activation. It would come out at you, literally exploding with ideas. So should we kind of give a quick overview of what SLA Industries was?
So what SLA Industries was is such a fascinating question to discuss, because SLA Industries is in some ways one man's passion project, despite there being several other people involved. SLA Industries is about Dave Alsop, and when SLA Industries is around and when it's not is very much based on what Dave Alsop feels like. SLA Industries went dormant for years. It came out in the 90s, and it has recently returned, and the second edition is making its way out. It's out in PDF, and it's making its way out to people for Christmas.
Did a Kickstarter, didn't it?
Yeah, some dark Christmas miracle. A Kickstarter that happened because someone successfully licensed some SLA off it, made a hames of their Kickstarter, and he bulled in, took everything back over, and decided the only way I'm going to save the money in this minis game is I produce a new Cannibal Sector 1 sourcebook, which he did. It was enormous. And then he said, well, I guess I better just do that second edition I've been threatening to do for years. He got a rush of enthusiasm again. He's like, I'm going to do this, baby. I can do the whole thing. Crazy.
He's fascinating. He just appears to be, as a creator, and I can kind of relate to this, he just appears to be fueled by a kind of frustrated anger and resentment.
Yeah.
There's an enormous, I think I've said it before, no, this didn't make it into the bracket fight if I remember, but I did say at some point to somebody, SLA Industries is potentially as big a property in terms of its ideas as something like Warhammer 40,000. It's just an enormous world that is struggling to get out of Dave Alsop's head, and he's made valiant efforts down through the decades. Because this game comes from, it reflects there's 80s British politics in it, but when did it first release? 93, I think.
Yeah.
That's when it first came out.
And it's a very British RPG in that it's incredibly about being kind of, you're a special ops soldier, but from another point of view, you're an unemployed person, or certainly seeing things a bit from the perspective of an unemployed person in Glasgow. And that's kind of the vibe that gets off it. There's a ton of stuff in there that makes sense if you're aware of what it was like at that point. Like I was
3-day working week.
I was a kid at the time, so I don't get it. But you'll see some echoes there. I often argued actually that SLA should have come back in 2008.
Yeah, after the collapse.
After the great credit crunch. And, well, we're going for a second one now, so that's okay. It's relevant again. Yeah. That SLA came back at that time, and SLA would have had you could say a ton about SLA. And SLA is very much a critique of capitalism. That's what SLA is about. Like, people often say, I think games should be political, or people say, games are always political. Games should be political, but they should be political in a way that you have to think about a little bit. If your argument's too obvious, there's nothing to explore there. There's nothing to chew on.
Just be brushed aside, yeah. What would I say about SLA? I think it's absolutely, in a way, it's of its time, and then bends that time far enough into the realms of what about if we do this and that it really is its own thing as well. I think you can, while there are definitely periods in recent history where SLA is a perfect fit in terms of a dark, warped mirror to hold up to the world, it exists and kind of has its own internal logic and works at almost any time. Like, you can still crack it open day and read it and go, I understand this setting, I understand these people. It's mad in the way that so many mid-90s RPGs were completely mad, but it's because there's that driving vision of Alsop's, it's kind of coherently mad enough that it hangs together really well, with some deep caveats and get-outs that
so many.
But they kind of help as well. Shall we talk about the truth a little bit?
I think we have to. Okay, so let's talk about what the game is ostensibly about.
Yeah.
And then let's mention the truth, because there's the whole meta-narrative aspect of there that completely distorts how you view the game. So what's SLA Industries about? SLA Industries is about a science fiction setting set in a far future that is not our future, or it's not our world at all.
Yeah, it's not. This isn't Earth. These aren't.
No.
Yeah, these aren't the peoples of Earth. There's some things you might look at kind of sideways and go, "Oh, that's kind of French and that's kind of British," but this isn't. This is nothing. This is as far from us as. In fact, it's further from us than 40k. There's no Holy Terra. There's no. We don't even know where. In fact, Earth is a myth.
Earth doesn't exist. There is a thing that's named a bit like Earth, White Earth, but it's not Earth. And what it is it's a far future setting where effectively one giant corporation has violently taken over the galaxy 900 years ago and conquered most of the galaxy. Most of the star systems are under their control, and that company is called SLA Industries. And typically in this game, you are a SLA operative who is effectively a bit like a special operations / special agent that SLA Industries deploy and give random jobs to in the standard setting, which is the city of Mort, which is this huge kind of, it's not an arcology, but it's basically a layer upon layer of city built upon top of on each other, forming this huge kind of ulcer or cancer on the surface of a planet.
It's interesting. This second edition actually sits down and tries to figure out what some of the realities of Mort are.
Yeah, absolutely. He tries to flesh it out a lot because people said to him it's ridiculous to have a planet that's entirely covered by a city, and he's like, okay, yeah, it would be.
Oh, really? Have you seen Coruscant?
Yeah.
It's like, well, if it's good enough for George Lucas.
And so the whole setting is you're working for this giant corporation, which is run by one man, Mr. Slayer, and you play a variety of you have the option of playing a human. They're not from Earth, but they are humans. Or a variety of kind of grotesque, different types of aliens, or genetically engineered killing machines, or weird psychics.
Various stripes.
All who've been basically taken under the corporate umbrella of SLA Industries. And that's the only reason they're still around, and all the other aliens were gotten rid of. And there are some opposition to SLA, but they're in the form of small companies. And the whole thing is this really weird RPG where you're kind of a special ops soldier stuck in a pretty terrible job, and you repeatedly get given terrible jobs to do, and amazing weapons to buy, and amazing armor to buy, and it's this, you're kind of stuck in this nightmarish job in some ways.
Watching a lot of TV where even more outlandish characters are killing each other and anybody else nearby for crazy sponsorship deals that afford them lifestyles that you could only hope to achieve. Although there were, in the original edition, there were books that covered playing those kinds of characters as well. So it's a brash, garish, neon, screaming nightmare of a world. There's not a lot about your experience of it that's meant to be really grounded in a fully thought out reality. But he's at pains to kind of detail some of the mundanities. You know, he tells you an awful lot about how the vast majority of people who simply don't have any sort of job live out on a stipend and bad TV, worse beer, endless violence in the form of entertainment.
It's intensely political in some ways. It talks about basically that a huge because this giant corporation runs everything, a very small number of people actually have jobs. So the vast majority of the citizens are unemployed, and they get this tiny stipend every week, unemployment basically, and they use that to buy a few creature comforts, maybe some terrible food, and they're going to sit there and watch TV until they get their stipend again. They go out and they buy some more beer and some more stuff, and that's their week. So they're all bored. It's a hopeless, crushing existence when you think about it.
Yeah, if you ever get into a universal credit argument and you want to argue against, just grab a copy of SLA Industries and sort of go, well, it'll be like this. It'll be complete rubbish all the time.
And what's interesting, but the whole thing is that these people, some of them lose all sense of, they become detached from reality and they become serial killers. So, what are you fighting in this? You're fighting serial killers. You're fighting kind of mutants. The enemies that SLA makes for itself.
Yeah.
By being an inhuman corporation that is obsessed with the bottom line in a situation where they control everything. Yes,
yet they are the fountainhead of all of their problems, and that's a through line for just about every adversary and problem you find in this setting. Is it really does all go back to Mr. Slayer. And
he created all of his own problem. All of his enemies are self-created.
Yeah, he's like Batman.
Yes. But he's like bad Batman, in that Batman shouldn't be the creation. Bad guy shouldn't exist because if Batman's to be a good thing, he has to be a reaction to their creation, because the cops can't deal with the Joker, only Batman can deal with the Joker. If the Batman creates the Joker, Batman's the bad guy.
It all sounds hideously depressing. Why on earth would anyone play this?
Because it's really funny. SLA Industries makes me, when I read SLA Industries, I laugh. Now, people tell me I have a very dark sense of humor, but SLA Industries, it makes me laugh. There are really funny bits in SLA Industries. There's I was reading a bit of it, and there's a quote from because he does a lot of little world building by just occasionally on a section slapping on a quote from a citizen or a quote from an operative or a quote from someone, just give you a flavour of what people think and how they talk. And one of the guys listed that was Mad Wee Frank, proprietor of Mad Wee Frank's Mad Wee Falafels. And I popped for that. I was like, that's great,
And those bits are quite obtuse initially, and then you start to notice there's sort of links between some of them, and you get a bit of a handle on the world. And then SLA Industries just kind of swims into focus, and you do start to see kind of all of it. Now, the SLA operatives that you play, they are, as you say, they're tooled up, slightly bored, given a lot of jobs that nobody wants. They have rank and authority of a sort, but everyone below them holds them in utter contempt, and everyone above them sort of spends their lives like cannon fodder. It is the problem of being a cog in a very big grindy machine. But they are, of course, given all sorts of interesting things to do, usually rather fatal, and that's kind of where the game lives, in the BPLs.
Yeah,
is that right?
BPNs.
The BPNs.
Blueprint Bulletin or Blueprint News.
Notices.
Yeah.
which is how the games master can dole out the mission of the week when you're playing Slay. You'll get a BPN that there's been an insurgence of cannibal pigmen into the sewers in downtown. So you got to get down there and figure out where they're getting through the defenses and the city walls. So I'm simplifying, and plug the gap, and that sort of leads you on a merry chase. And that's a simple one. That's a low level one. Others can be more media focused. Like the media plays a huge part in Slay, doesn't it? In terms of controlling what people see and what they think about what's going on.
And the horrific thing is, from the media in the 1990s, the media today looks a lot more like Slay's media, and it's terrifying.
Yeah.
There's so much of Slay is like, yeah, this is a bit prophetic about some stuff.
So I haven't had a chance to read the second ed. Has Dave Alsop taken on kind of TikTok and all the sort of things that have happened in the media since the mid-90s that he could never have predicted, but he got very close to the tone? Has he sort of found that flash celebrity stuff? Has he incorporated any of that?
There were always the flash celebrities in it, because there was always the contract killers, and there was always the whole thing really predicted reality TV in some ways, because they had the whole thing of basically camera crews following around ops to get because it's kind of probably inspired by Cops or something, following around ops doing stuff, and then there's more of that in terms of these guys were basically, there was a bunch of shivers who were a social media sensation when they were taking back one of the cannibal sectors, and one of the guys' thing was he would just drive his APC into inadvisable places and open up with his Power Reaper, and that was his go-to, and I was like, that's my favorite McGunty moment, basically kick out the door, Power Reaper going, open up with a machine gun somewhere flashy. I was just like, then he eventually gets killed, and I was like, oh, well, that was the end of that series, really. They could never restart that. They never recapture the magic. So it's...
yeah, and so there's a lot of the world flavour is built around media transmissions, and you could gain extra credit if you took along a camera crew or a camera drone.
Or got yourself chipped in the head with a thing that let everyone record everything you saw and heard.
Which, of course, raises further complications, because you don't have to read very much of SLA Industries to understand that the player characters will very quickly run into some of the unfortunate truths that really shouldn't make it into the public sphere. And that's when things get lethal, because then your team might become the next target of an operation.
Yeah.
So you're going to need to find powerful patronage in one of the various sort of sub corporations of SLA Industries, unless you want to end up being in the wrong place at the wrong time, having seen the wrong thing. Yeah,
there's a whole thing of, originally there was a big hidden kind of meta plot, and we're not quite explaining what's going on. And there used to be a big thing in the old SLA books of, there was an opening fiction and a closing fiction, which often hinted at something's going on, something very strange, and it was enticing, like any mystery is. Like, what's going on, and like what's really going on in this world that has this weird quality to it. And some parts of SLA will read like a weird parody of the real world, and you're like, is this deliberate? Is this a style choice? What's going on here? And some of the stuff is drastically unrealistic. It's like, where are all these giant pigs coming from? And like why are these cannibals so dangerous? And like, why does SLA allow these two evil corporations to exist? And as time has gone on, Dave Alsop, over the years before this one, gradually started to expand the setting and started to explain some stuff about, here are some of the pre-conflict aliens, the old aliens that SLA mostly got rid of. They're not all gone. And started to explain something of the backstory. And there was a writer's Bible called The Truth handed out to writers who were writing in SLA back in the 90s. And when SLA kind of shut down, somebody leaked it. And The Truth as a piece of documentation is mad, because it kind of goes that, so SLA Industries is a universe created by someone in our universe through use of on a psychic using a special drug, and they've created this universe and trapped their alter ego in it. And as a result of this, only some people are like, and so it's all dreams. No, it's not all a dream, but some people are realer than other people. And that was a big, and when people found this out, a lot of people get very upset because they go, this whole thing's made up. I was like,
yeah,
well, it is an RPG, it is made up. But
I think so. The beauty of SLA is that it's working on all of these levels as commentary. It is, as you say, it's a commentary on Thatcherite kind of politics in the 80s and 90s. It's a kind of a war. It's a great sort of take on the coming media storm that would be instant celebrity and cheap violence and reality television and sort of the hyper competitive. Like we've people who are competing at baking these days.
Yes,
think about that, folks. Baking. I've watched people compete at painting. It's like, this is nuts. I mean, competing at painting is a long history, but baking. Okay. Yeah. And then yes, it has this meta kind of reality that is, in a weird way, I think, Alsop's commentary on the nature of role-playing games themselves and the way that you are sort of splitting your self and your identity, and then you've got the GM who's doing an awful lot of splitting and the shared hallucination that goes into playing a game. So the truth is interesting, and of course it generated that level of weirdness that it has at least some explanation for the mystery of White Earth and the ebb and why the world doesn't make any sense but hangs together the way it does. And if you like to have something more to dig into, then the truth is kind of a fascinating second layer of the story. And then you go back and read the other stuff and go, I see, that must be this thing and that must be that other thing.
Yeah.
Does it really make it into the second edition?
So initially, people asked about the truth because it dominates discussion of SLA online from the serious SLA heads. It's like, what is it? Is this? And because they've also said, no, it's what was given out there was not the full story. It's different to that. It was just what was told to writers who were going to be working on it. And the opening and closing fictions of the new edition, if you know SLA, seem to basically lay out a lot of the truth. And you're thinking, oh well, wait, what? What's going on? Is it still true? Is it still there? Like, for example, the closing fiction is, if you're a real heavy SLA head, one of the kind of big events in the past was a writer, a journalist in SLA called Wave Lindsay writes a piece called Integration 20, which lays out how the world of progress actually works. And the whole thing is he gets killed in the backstory. It's just a backstory plot, and it's mentioned it's very important. And some people say that Wave Lindsay becomes something called Halloween Jack, who's this kind of mythical bogeyman on the City of Mort. And the last page of the second book is the first page of Integration 20 by Wave Lindsay. And if you read it, you know the backstory. That will make you go, holy crap. And that's kind of what it is. It's a really weird... The second edition, the stuff I love about it, I deeply love about it, and the stuff I'm a lot more conflicted on. But the setting I love SLA as a setting. I think it's a really creative setting. It's got a unique flavour. There isn't anything exactly like SLA in the market in terms of flavour of setting. I've always been worried it's not a very gameable setting, but I love reading it. And if anyone said, hey, I'm going to run some SLA, I'd be like, yeah, I'm totally down to play.
We have talked an awful lot about the setting now, and it is fairly unique. I think the only thing that comes close would be some parts of the 2000 AD output, but that's piecemeal. SLA really has it all. But we should talk about the rules and mechanics. The original game was somewhat challenging mechanically. Yeah. The original game did a very controversial thing, which is basically had an initiative
based or phased initiative combat, where there were 5 phases in a combat round, and the amount of dexterity you had determined how many of them you got to act in.
Popular enough back in the day, like Second Ed Shadowrun operated in the same manner, and others have since, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's because, like, if you're a human with kind of decent dex, you might get to act in 2, and if you're a Wraith Raider who's got amazing dex, you might get to act in 5. And that became a real, like, if one player gets 3 times the actions of another player, that player's going to feel very hard done by. And that was always controversial, and it used a kind of fairly straightforward mechanic in terms of rolling dice that meant that, yeah, it was kind of, you would get weirdly chipped down by some stuff mostly, and then you would get very badly hurt. And healing was really, did you have an ebb on? If you don't really have a lot of healing. And it, not bad, but there's a bunch of weird little meta enforcement things. For example, guns are really good, but he tried to discourage guns and use melee weapons again by making bullets really expensive.
The Chris Rock solution.
Yeah, the bullet tax. Like, if you want to shoot someone with a hesh round, you better have a lot of money. You better really. He's 7 credits for the shooting at somebody. Are they worth doing for that? So yeah, it's and
I suppose that's brilliantly realised in the setting, because like the Shivers, who are the basic police enforcement for the setting, are famously generally issued with non-lethal ammo.
Yeah.
And then they're sent to guard the city walls against ravenous hordes of crazy kind of cannibal cultists and all sorts of horned-headed lunatics and all
carrions and cannibal cults and manchines, all the good stuff. All the good stuff.
And they've got rubber bullets, and it's just that brilliant, like, even the people who are armed to the teeth are sort of impotent in the face of the really manic stuff in the setting. And of course, the player character is only slightly better off, and yes, they're counting their bullets. Okay, so mechanically, Second Ed, I'm sure you've had a chance to go over.
Yeah, I've had a look. So the skills are fine. It's it's effectively become a dice pool system, but one dice is determining success or failure, and the other dice are determining degree of success, effectively. So one of the problems is that combat rules, if you're a well-built combat character, you're going to find yourself hitting as hard as you can possibly hit with great facility. And I think it turns into a bit of a rocket tag game, which might be okay because it might be about trying to utilize cover, except cover doesn't actually protect you a huge amount. So you'd have to see. I had a look at the rules and I kind of went, oh dear. There's some good ideas in there. I think the difficulty number was calibrated off. Like, I'll give you an example. If you're trying to hit somebody in melee, you roll a d10 and you add to the d10 roll your stat and your skill. And in combat, you're trying to get to 10. So if you roll a 10 successfully on the total of 10 on that roll, you succeed. And there are some small modifiers and defenses you can take. And then for each point of skill you have, you roll an additional d10, which is effectively like your extra effect dice, up to a cap of, I think it's, 4 or more. So if you have, let's say you're a Stormer, who's one of the genetically engineered killing machines, and you take Dex 6, which is trivial to take at the start, and you take a skill rating of 3 in guns, you're like, okay, now I have to roll 1 dice for the success or failure, and then 1 plus my skill rating dice for my skill dice. I toss them in, so I've got 1 success dice and 4 skill dice. I roll, and I add 9 to all of those rolls. Every one of them that it gets to a 10 is a success. Now, I don't know how many of you can do maths, but that means all of them succeed. Like you think, oh, the 1 there's an auto fail. No, 1 is not an auto fail. 10 is not an auto success. All of them succeed. And what that means if you're trying to shoot somebody is you automatically shoot them in the target in the head.
I guess the question is, is it enough to put them down?
Probably not the first one, but certainly the second one's a serious issue. And it's one of those games where Yeah, getting really badly hurt is very bad. So you have hit points, they take away the hit points, and when you start losing too many hit points, you start taking wounds. And basically, you're thinking, oh, so you can take a few wounds, then you go down. Not so much. Wounds are sort of a serious penalty, and if you're reduced to 0 hit points, you die. So I was kind of like, I think you get shot twice and then you're dead. And they're like, oh, so you start dying and then someone can medicate you. And I was like, no, you're just dead. There's things there are some meta currencies you can spend to not die, but they're not super common. And certainly I would look at it as going, this is a game that would reward you going first and killing your opponent before they have a chance to kill you, because not getting killed is... The best way to not get killed in this game is to kill this side first. Which makes a challenging game to run as a GM, actually, because people not being able to soak a certain amount of damage mean that if you ever ambush your players, they can legitimately be quite annoyed because their character just died, and it really wasn't their fault. They didn't do anything silly, they just got ambushed.
There's a big old gear section in the book, and
huge,
like
huge
armor. Armor features fairly prominently. Like, you should probably walk around with at least some armor on when it's this lethal a game. Does it actually do enough, though?
Not really. The standard armor, I did some maths on this, and standard armor is like the body blocker, which the Slayers, which is all you can afford. You can't afford any more at starting unless you're prepared to
mortgage one or more souls.
Tie yourself in a way that would basically would freak people out.
I feel like it's also making a point. Like, body blocker costs 400 creds, everything else is thousands to pick up. I think the next cheapest one is like 15 or 1600.
Yeah, like I did the math. A chunky weapon does 10 to 25 damage. And you'll have 15 to 28 hit points, depending on race and damage reduction 4 from armor, and you die at 0. So one hit doesn't definitely kill you, but 2 will probably certainly do for you. And like, all the bad guys are statted like that. It's not like only a min-maxing player would get this. No, all the bad guys are statted like that. I took a look, and they're what it needs. I think you could fix it a bit by raising the target number a bit in combat. And try and suss it out a little bit. Like, the races that don't get a 6 in their starting one start to feel really hard done by if you do that. So you'd have to be careful, but you could do something to at least make it a little less monstrous. Put it like that. It's
an interesting setting in terms of how, like, combat. I've never really been able to figure out just how much combat should feature in a Slay game. And a lot of it comes down to some of the stuff you talked about, that lethality is there. You're being told about these waves, hordes of enemies that could potentially rip you limb for limb. So, and you need to put at least one bullet in each of them. But you're given these kind of in-game reasons why you're not going to be going, you're not going to be leaning on full auto very often. So I've always kind of wondered, like, when and where do you fight in Slay? It's hard to kind of quite work out where to position it.
I think you fight very nervously in Slay. It's a nervy sort of game to have combat in, actually, as a player, because so much you can get hurt really. You don't ever want to have anything that vaguely resembles a fair fight, and the GM will get annoyed at you at a bunch of trying to scout ahead and trying to suss out where the bad guys are and try to make sure that they can't, get you. Like you might think, oh, I'll toss a carnivorous pig at my at one of my players, and a carnivorous pig runs around the corner and he attacks your guy who's carrying a rifle. The guy with the rifle can't dodge because he's carrying a rifle. It takes 2 hands. He can't use his melee defense because he's carrying a rifle. It takes 2 hands. So the pig bites him. The pig auto hits him in the head, stunning him. So he goes last on the next round. So then the pig goes again and bites him and kills him. And you're like, okay, well, that's learn B, I guess.
And the pig's got regeneration, so
no, absolutely. The pigs are tough, man. But it's a hyper lethal system.
I think the answer might be that if you're in combat, you have screwed up.
Yeah, possibly.
Like it is all about being as unfair as possible to the denizens of, or whoever the target of your mission is. Be as unfair as possible because they sure as hell aren't going to give you an inch.
But there's such a big chapter on guns, Mick.
It's a huge, yeah. Like this is why I find it like Dave Alsop definitely has some stuff in mind, and he writes these big sections and loving detail of all of the different sort of armor and guns and how they work and the history of them and what they're used for. But damned if I'm going to use any of them. I'm just I'll run, thanks.
But you've got all these players who are explicitly building combat characters who are going to be lethal in combat as well, and they'll want to do combat. Like they'll be like, if you build a Stormer, you're going to not want to be told, excuse me, I'm going to use me 2 chuckle dusters to shred somebody. Thank you very much. I bought these chainsaw-powered knuckle dusters. Thank you very much. And I'm going to be using them.
And a Stormer is a genetically engineered killing machine with more eyes than knees. Actually, that's another... So I don't think we'll quite run down all of the classes or character types or whatever, but what I would like to talk about is layout and artwork.
Oh, absolutely. Well, so the way the book is laid out... Okay, from my complete layman's point of view, is they've kind of done the standard-ish kind of white pages with, nicely laid out paragraph tasks, black box outs for flavor text and kind of more specific setting information. Lots of inset art. Most of the art is excellent to good quality. There are a couple of dodgy bits, but it's mostly very good. Take a look at page 25 there, Mick, and you'll see there's a lovely picture of Halloween Jack just hanging out there. It's
one of my favourite in the book. Really moody, sets the scene, and gives you this iconic character. It's kind of a throwback to the first edition cover as well, which also had Halloween Jack kind of hanging out in a bit of urban decay. It's a 2-column book. There's big black kind of headings that let you know exactly where you are in the book all the time. It's very easy on the eyes for the most part. Although there's a lot of tables used, a lot of little tables that kind of deliver stats and things. It's although a lot of it's on white plain backgrounds, which makes it an easy screen read as well. There's not a lot to fault here. Actually, the typography is excellent for the most part.
I think it's very well presented. It's a very easy... I found it a very easy book to read in PDF. And PDFs are not always the most easy to read.
No, I think that it doesn't stray particularly anywhere. Careful use of black, white, and red, and grey, and then the artwork. Like, there's bits of artwork by people like Clint Langley that I think should have been given far more prominence. There's a slight mismatch. I feel like... Now, a lot of people I talk to, when they're criticising artwork, will throw around this kind of, it's a bit World of Warcrafty. And they have redesigned some of the player races since the first edition. And yes, I think it is fair to say that there's a slight World of Warcrafty take on some of these redesigns.
I think the Shakhdars were a victim a little bit, because that's one of the more controversial redesigns of looking a bit too much like the Predator originally, and also looking a bit too much like the Stormers originally. So they wanted to make them a bit more visually identifiable, and I think that's where it kind of the wheels went off the apple cart.
But for the most part, there's nice splashes of colour thrown in now in a game that is described in terms of rain-strewn darkness. Like these illustrations do bring lots of flash and colour because you're dealing with the most colourful characters in the setting. So it's nice to see that they're not all in drab black, which a lot of artists can use to hide a lot of details. There's plenty of detail in the artwork here to give you some idea of what you're going to be playing with and as. But yeah, like for some reason Clint Langley's stuff just gets quarter page treatment, which I think is criminal. But
it's an odd choice, I'll grant you. A very odd choice.
Because he ain't cheap.
No. What I wonder was there was a certain amount of, I don't know, friend rates or whatever, I would say that Dave Alsop is a well-respected artist in his own right. And
yes. Probably not enough of his stuff here, unless, his style has changed quite a bit. his black and whites from the original, like the artwork in the original Slay book, if you ever get a chance to look at it, is absolutely fantastic. It stands up there alongside any of the best stuff that was coming out of Games Workshop or 2000 AD in the mid-90s. It's just amazing stuff, and so much of it is what conveys the Slay universe in I think the purest form also can manage. There's an argument that really Slay is a great example of the frustrated world builder. Like there's probably an amazing heavy metal movie in Slay, or like a crazy sort of animated sci-fi epic, or a manga or something. It boils out as an RPG because, as good an artist as he is, you can't really draw the oppression of the welfare state.
No.
So, especially when it's being lit by gunfire.
His style's changed so much that I am half convinced that the guns in the gun section, which were all lovingly rendered, were done by him. I don't know that for sure, but
very
I think
much of a style, yeah.
I think he did here are all the pieces of armor, here are all the guns, because I really want to show what this stuff looks like, because I think it looks really cool. And it's a passion project in a way that you don't see a huge amount of nowadays. Like, you don't see as many, I'm doing this thing. Is it advisable? Is this the best way to do it? No, but I'm doing it my way, and it is all the better for it. So yeah, it's like, I dearly love it. I would recommend anyone read it. I wouldn't necessarily recommend they play it, but I'm still tempted to play it, even when I look at it and I go, I know this is bad.
And that first 99, 100 pages of the book is just setting stuff, and it's a great read.
Fabulous read.
And it's great, so that it's some really good lessons in kind of world building and the strangeness of Slay. We're all over the place here now.
We really are.
It is.
But that's Slay. Slay is being all over the place.
And all of this is packed into a fairly concise book by today's standards. Like, it's 230 odd pages.
Yep.
It gets a system, it gets gear, it gets the player characters, it gets the world. There's a good threat. There's a big threat section. There's a big antagonist section in this book, which, like, I've read RPG books that are far longer than this that never manage to get as many interesting bad guys in. In fact, it's one of the failings of a lot of core books, is that you're left going, oh, I really need a monster manual along with this. There's nothing here for me to throw at the players. But this has... Actually, can we talk about the Xi'an?
Yeah, let's talk about the Xi'an.
They're now positioned. So, what are they?
So, originally in Slay, it was kind of the bad guys were the soft companies. Dark Knight, Thresher, and Tech-Trex were the kind of core antagonists. And Dark Knight were terrorists' version of Slay. Thresher wore giant suits of power armor, and Tech-Trex were kind of crappy little two-legged robots that were kind of halfway between, Huey, Dewey, and Louie from Silent Running and R2-D2, armed with a submachine gun. So they were the kind of the core bad guys. And then as time went on, they sort of introduced the fact that there are cannibals. There are Manchines, which are robots that are stuck out and outside the city. And then they also started talking about Carrion, this which turns out to be a native race, and they reveal the origin of the Carrion in this one. And then they start talking about these cultists, and you're like, oh, these are just more mad people, more serial killers? And they're like, no, Xi'an cultists worship White Earth. And you kind of go, well, what's White Earth? And they go, well, that's a mystery, you'll have to find out later. And Xi'an cultists effectively use their blood to pull in creatures from a different reality, sort of, into Slay's universe, and now these are new bad guys you have to fight, and there's dream entities as well who are kind of quasi-real things that coalesce from somewhere.
All playing back into that original truth and the mystery of White Earth, and the kind of the out near the edges, the world is very weird aspect of Slay, which I quite like. There's just it's not a game for people who like concrete reasons for the things. No, you've got to be willing to live with the uncertainty.
But I mean, in defense of them now, I mean, when you look at it, they've got effectively 6 or 7 kind of types of bad guy to run with.
Yeah, there's a lot more variety now than there ever was.
You got Dark Knight, you got Thresher, you got Tech-Trex, you got the Scavs, who are, basically kind of weird mutant super soldiers. You've got the Dream entities. You've got Renegade Shivers. You've got the Manchines. You've got like downtown mercenaries, serial killers. And all these things are like around as like bad guys. And there's even more bad guys. You pick up the SLA Industries Cannibal Sector 1 book. You get an overview of the Cannibal Sector, which is an incredibly strong setting for kind of a weird war game or weird kind of war movie where your characters go out into. Effectively, they're trying to repacify and take back a place that's gone really badly wrong. And what's nice about it is the unifying theme of all these bad guys is they're all Slay's fault. Yeah, every one of them is created by Slay.
Every single time. There's and I think that's one of the things that's kept this in people's minds. Just how well it all hangs together. Perhaps not the mechanically lethal, and maybe that's for the best. But the setting, the ideas that are wrapped up in the game, the bad guys, the philosophies that are being explored, all reinforce each other at some level.
It's genuinely one of my favourite RPGs. I'll buy anything for Slay because I just love it. It's a very particular type of RPG. I'm not going to say this would be a great RPG, but if someone said to me, "Oh, I'm going to run a Slay game," I'd be like, "I'm there, man. I'm there. Let's have a bit of crack here."
I would grab 6 cans of rubbish beer and my black trench coat, and I would be right over. I think it's always going to stick with me. I'm delighted that I didn't really know it was being kickstarted. I'm delighted that this book is out. I'll probably pick up a copy because I don't have a core Slay book on my shelf at the moment. Although I have the old contract directory and a couple of the other books from the first edition, which still have a bunch of stuff I'd use because so much of these books are fluff.
Most decanonized now. I mean, that's the weirdest thing. Dave Alsop decanonized a bunch of work, so yeah, that's no longer in the canon. Yeah. Right. I'm trying to remember what's still in there. I think Mort's gone and contract directory's gone.
It's just an oddity that's kind of bled over from an alternative Mort.
Yeah, absolutely.
Xi'an cultists are bringing through. And somewhere in the mix, somewhere in the background, Halloween Jack is watching.
Absolutely.
Right. We've some of this, guys, is going to sound like complete gobbledygook, but we're both sort of so au fait with the setting and the personalities. It's like Marvel. It's like Star Wars in the sense that there's these big personalities that run through the entire setting that could potentially show up, although I feel like that's probably the cheapest sort of version of the game, where you're interacting with Mr. Slayer or any of the big named characters. God, it's been so long. Angel, is that one of them? Yeah. Okay.
Intruder and all the stuff.
Intruder, yeah.
It's just there's so much meat on those strange bones. There's so much meat on them.
It is kind of like a rat kebab, isn't it? It's like,
yeah.
Not sure where to start here. Okay. It's a good book. Presumably it's on Drive-Thru-RPG, or where can you get it at the moment?
I'm going to check if it's actually out on Drive-Thru. I'm not sure it's out. They did preview copies for the Kickstarter backers and to take a look at, and you can get the quick start at the moment, which contains most of the regular rules. And you can get the Cannibal Sector 1 PDF, which is 352 pages, is significantly bigger.
Bigger, yeah.
RPG. But the core book is not out yet, as far as I know. There are some progress reports and other stuff that they've done, which is kind of similar and linked, but the core book is not out yet. It will be out shortly, however.
We'll throw a link to the quick start rules on Drive-Thru, which can be had for a couple of shekels if we've piqued your interest. Yeah, nothing quite like it. This is the best produced version of it I've read. It's a slightly more coherent world. It's got more of everything. Like, this is a book you can put down and start running from. And you've got just about everything you need. You've got a setting, you've got player characters, you've got threats, you've got enough structure to get your game off the ground and for it to be uniquely Slay flavoured.
Absolutely.
Will we leave it? They've added Birdmen as a playable race, but we won't.
They got rid of the Vevifons, which I was very disappointed about.
Oh yeah,
they'll be back at some stage. Apparently, I think they will. The good ones always come back.
Fingers crossed.
Absolutely. I just want to play a biogenetic, T1000. That's all I want.
Yeah, with crushing debt and some
crushing death and desperately little understanding of everything else in the world. I can mimic anything, but I don't really understand anything. Absolutely.
A sort of warped understanding from too much TV. Right. Okay. Let's leave it there. Let's draw a rain-soaked conclusion. I think we just did this episode because we're kind of both enthusiastic about it as going back and remembering what it was like. It's great that there's a new book out, and fingers crossed, Mr. Alsop's enthusiasm is kind of reinforced and reinvigorated.
He's said he's got a ton more stuff planned. If that's true, we're happy days. Happy days.
Fingers crossed. We'll hang in there for our next BPN and Universal Credit Stipend. So let's sign off. Find us social media, guys. Join us on our Discord. Check the show notes and links for more. We are always happy to. If you've got a favorite setting that is due a revival, or you just want to shoot the breeze with us about it, we can find someone who's played it or loves it as much as we love Slay, and we'd love to hear from you guys. But until then, until the bullet tax really bites into our next job, this party's over.
Thanks for listening to The Adventuring Party. You can find show notes and links to things we've mentioned at www.theadventuringparty.net and on our Facebook page. You can leave comments there, or talk to our Twitter account at AdventuringPTY, or you can record a voice message at www.speakpipe.com/theadventuringparty. We can also be contacted directly by email at party@theadventuringparty.net. If you'd like to be in touch with the party all the time, come join our Discord server, link in the show notes. The Adventuring Party, released under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike and Version 3 license.